Hello, welcome to New Filmmakers Los Angeles in partnership with Movie Maker magazine. I'm Carolyn McDonald, and I'm here with Lindsey Hagen and her film After Skid Row. Let's take a look at a clip from the film.
Well, I know that walk anywhere.
Hey, baby, how you doing? Good to see you too.
Get you a pedicure so that you'll be able to walk over and visit me.
I don't think I'm gonna walk, but
So Lindsey, welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. It's great to see you.
Great to see you too. So tell us, for people who haven't seen the film, give us a synopsis and tell us what the film's about.
Sure. So my short documentary, After Skid Row, essentially documents the journey of a woman as she transitions from homeless life into her first home after living on the streets for the past 10 years. So it points out, some glaring holes and difficulties that she has to overcome, but also celebrates this next step in her journey.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful film. And tell me, how did this story come to you? How did you meet her? How did you meet Miss Carter?
Sure. So I was coming up to a little bit of a career change. I had kind of stepped away from the executive producer role and wanted to step more into directing and being really intentional about the stories that I told. So I'd reached out to a journalist who focused on social impact, and I'd asked her if she wanted to help develop and research some stories that were more timely. And she got back to me and was like, I'm so busy. I'm actually living on Skid Row. I've been living here for the past 6 months, and I'm working with this woman to help organize her mutual aid. So I can't take on any additional work, but this woman just got her keys to her first home, and I'm going to help her, set up her home and kind of get her feet on the ground. So it could be a unique opportunity to get a film and get some more exposure around this, pivotal moment in Granny's life. So things changed pretty quickly. I wasn't expecting to go in that conversation and coming out of it, with an idea, a concept, a loose concept for a film. And so, 3 days later, we were filming and meeting Granny for the first time. And I was very fortunate because I was able to kind of lean on some of the guidance of that journalist who'd already forged a really close relationship with Granny and a friendship. So I followed her lead, and Granny is a force. She's a very strong woman. She has a lot of spunk. So I just tried not to get in her way.
I could tell she's got so much spirit and verve, So tell me, what was it like for you directly to establish a relationship with her and gain her trust and be able to get those intimate questions asked and for her to reveal so much of herself to you?
Yeah, we came in pretty quickly. The first day I met Granny, we had cameras. So, I mentioned this before, but having that close relationship with the journalist I was working with was really important. So that there was one point in the making of the film where Amelia Reyno, the journalist and mutual aid organizer, came to me and was like, I think this would really work better if I conducted the interview. And, as a director, you hold your interview close because sometimes that's the backbone of your piece. But in this circumstance, that was the best decision for Granny and her comfort level. So leaning into the relationships that were already really closely established. So Amelia conducted the interview. And then I also wanted to do my due diligence to make sure there was representation on both sides of the lens. So we had a 50-50 split on our crew, people of color on the crew, and some of our filmmakers, live right down the street from where Granny lives. So I think that helped a lot. And then as far as my relationship with Granny, like I said, I tried not to get in her way. And then also taking those down moments to just be there with her, like human to human, without the camera, no story objective, just exist with her, because this is a huge change in her life. I mean, she's learning how to reintegrate into society for the first time in 10 years. So I wanted to be really patient with her, and we tried to display that, with shorter shoot days and just not having super structured expectations with the film and really following her throughout her transition.
Absolutely. And what was it like for her going through this journey as you were documenting it? What could you sense, her feeling about you chronicling her journey?
You know, she wasn't shy with the film crew, but at the same time, I mean, she was unpacking a lot. 10 years on the streets, your only focus is basically surviving and getting through. So I think coming into a home gave her time to process a lot of these emotions, a lot of these parts of herself that had been stifled and kind of pushed aside for so long. So those moments came very organically. Honestly, they came when you were barely paying attention, or maybe you were between a shot and she's processing something, very heavy for the first time. And so we just tried to be, observant and take a fly on the wall approach, because we didn't want to hinder her progress by any means. And then, there was a moment where we went horseback riding, and that wasn't so much a literal part of her coming into her housing situation, but it was a part of her reclaiming this part of herself as a cowgirl. And she grew up around horses and riding horses. So we, as a film team, wanted to help facilitate those moments so that, she could have that power again. And when she got up on the horse, and grabbed those reins, there was no stopping her. Like, I saw this woman's like true potential, and she jumped on the horse. I can't tell you how old she is, but she's old enough where I was worried when she jumped on the horse. And I just saw her in such a powerful, beautiful, resilient light. Anyway, I could go on forever.
And I could listen to you forever. And it was that came across so much, her journey, her emotional journey, during the film. I remember that moment when she said wit come back, which she was talking about her wits, getting her wits back, and wit come back. I mean, that stuck to me so closely, because she was very aware of her change and going through this change. And could you talk about what, the things you saw, how she changed during this journey, and you being able to chronicle it? And I'm sure you have tons of stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor,
Yeah.
in witness to that journey. Can you give us a little more details about moments you witnessed like that? Because another one for me was when she was getting her hair done, and you could see the process of this woman, like she eloquently said, surviving to living.
Yeah. There was quite a transformation. There were moments of extreme frustration and just, she was tired. She put so much energy in those years, and just she has not had an easy run. The rug had been ripped out from under Granny so many times over and over again, that by the time we were making this film, she was exhausted and trying to navigate a world that was completely unfamiliar to her. That's frustrating. She didn't know how to work her phone. She didn't have a computer. She landed in this home, but it was an empty home. The lights weren't on, and she didn't know how to turn the lights on. And so there were some big hurdles. The post-housing support gap was a real frustration for her. But at the same time, that reclaiming of self, that self-care, getting her hair done and getting her nails done. And you saw her friend Renee come into the scene. That was a rekindling of a childhood relationship. They grew up together. And that happened organically. When she got her housing, Renee had been looking for her on Skid Row for years, and finally tracked her just as she was placed in a home. And so we got to see this flourishing in her relationships and her interpersonal life within herself. I'm sure you saw her doing art. She started drawing again.
Yes.
Because she had time and she had safety to be able to, partake in those activities. So it was really beautiful to witness.
And what do you think some of what your crew was? Were they absorbing this transformation and this journey? Could share that maybe in terms of, you're producing a film, you're shooting a film, but on it, obviously there's a human life journey going on. And how can you witness maybe that your crew may have transformed during this process?
Oh yeah. I mean, we all had tears in our eyes throughout the entire process. Hopeful and happy tears at moments, and also just tears of like disbelief and agonizing pain to know that this woman had gone through so much and had to overcome so much and keep trying. And then to see her after 10 years in this state where she still has a sense of humor and this wit and this charisma that it was baffling at times. If I were to put myself in her shoes, it was astounding. So we were all completely moved by Granny, and she's witty and she's absolutely hilarious. She kept us on our toes. I mean, if you got in her way, she would like smack you with a pole. She we were in awe of Granny. We're in support of Granny, and you know, one of our crew members, you know, his girlfriend was cleaning out her closet and was like, "Bring all of this to Granny when you show up on set tomorrow." So the whole crew just absolutely fell in love with her.
Yeah, I'm sure, no doubt, no doubt. And another question a little bit about that journey. I mean, there are just a lot of moments that stood out for me as a viewer in the film, but there were two: when she was eating outside and when she was the opening shot of her cutting her food with the scissors, you know, were certainly traits from being on the street, you know, and when she was cutting the food, she was in her place. And when she was outside eating, she had the place. So can you talk about maybe how her feeling was to, even though she had changed physically, maybe not psychologically?
Right. I think, gosh, I mean, think of any learned trait that you refine and develop over 10 years. Those are just learned behaviors that, you know, carried over. Same with you know, you saw her kitty corner where she would sleep on the floor, even though she had a bed, the bed was too soft and she was so used to sleeping on a hard surface. So, and then how she kept her belongings in her boot, that was a learned like survival behavior, to keep her belongings close to her. So I don't know if she'll ever lose those traits. I think they're pretty handy, but definitely learned over the course of time.
Yeah, amazing. And again, as you as a filmmaker now, you've spent this time, you know, with her and probably witnessed this amazing moments in this journey. How did you determine, you know, what to keep, you know, to be a part of the film, and what not to keep? You know, I mean, could have been a feature, you know, depending upon, you know, the scope and time that you had to tell the story.
Yeah. Gosh, it would have been fun to make a feature. She has a very interesting like family history. Her uncles were like very famous American Black cowboys. And that's a whole other story. I started researching and finding old newspaper articles. So we could have gone that direction. You know, with documentary film, there's like the more journalistic approach, and then there's a little bit more of the storytelling approach that we're existing in the space with them, but there's opportunity to have some more symbolic moments that are a little more creative. And so one of those moments was a scene with the horses. You know, that wasn't literally a stepping stone on her journey, but it was symbolically, it played a role in her, you know, tapping into these parts of her youth and her identity and reclaiming those elements of herself. And so that was one of those scenarios that we almost got rid of completely because we didn't know if that was an accurate depiction of this journey out of homelessness. But in the sense of it being a symbolic representation of her reclaiming of her identity, that's how we justified that scene.
Rightfully so, and I'm so glad you left it in, because
I'm glad.
you're absolutely right. You know, because that it's a part of her journey. Her identity is a part of her. You know, is the journey. You know, again, in the internal journey. You know, and even like we were saying a minute ago about how, you know, even though she's physically in a different place, you know, a lot of those traits, those learned behaviors she took with her. So now she's reclaiming something that was hers before. You know, and making that's just this moment in time, a long period of time, but, you know, not her identity, just her experience for a period of time. Great. So a couple more questions for you. Tell me, how did this process influence you? I mean, what did you learn personally during this process as a filmmaker and as a person?
Yeah, I mean, I've always had a keen interest, and I've always leaned into wanting to understand more around our homeless and housing crisis. And I would say for me, it comes from a bit of a personal angle. My father struggled with mental illness for many, many years. And there's a moment in this film where Granny talks about live suicide, and I can relate to that. Like, that was the state that my father existed in for a long time. And I remember during that state, I remember how people in the community would look at him like he was subhuman. And I remember seeing him in that state and recognizing that he had the same demeanor as lots of people that I'd seen on the street. So I drew this correlation all of a sudden that anyone in this situation is usually not homeless by choice. It's a matter of circumstances and lack of support and systems that aren't intertwining, and a lot of systemic oppression. You know, and in some people's case, the rug just continuously being pulled out from under them. So I already had that empathetic, I guess, realization and connection. So when this story just kind of serendipitously came about, I wanted to spark more empathy for the viewer. I didn't want people, especially in LA, where, you know, I'm on the Nextdoor app. When I was living in LA, I would see what community members would write about the homeless community, and it was appalling. It was shameful, honestly, and there's a total lack of understanding. So I wanted to remove the stigma by focusing on this rise out of homelessness, while also acknowledging that that's not easy, and that the systems are not set up to support Granny. So that's kind of a roundabout way of answering it.
Yeah, no, and it's a beautiful answer, and I applaud your efforts and to make this film and share it, because I think it is an important story, and one that people need to see for that empathy. You know, absolutely, absolutely. So tell us, how can we keep up with your film as it continues its journey, and you and the work you're doing?
You can go to our website, www.afterskidrow.com. And you can follow my journey, lindseyhagen.net, or my Instagram is linze3. And I'm hoping I can do a screening with Granny. I think her on a stage would make her really, really happy. She's home. She's still in her home, but I know she is pretty lonely. So I'm trying to find a way to get her in front of a crowd so that she can share her story, you know, on her own too.
That would be great, and her history. I mean, I know a lot about the Black cowboy history, and it's a story that, you know, we can continue to tell and needs to be told. You know, and I'd love to hear her story about her family history and that. So I hope you can do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Lindsey, for talking to us today. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and I wish you the best of luck in all your future creative endeavors.
Thank you so much.